As someone who loves manga and queer stories and horror, I was really excited when I was browsing a bookshop a few weeks ago and I saw a manga that looked like horror from its title and its cover, and I read the blurb and it was about a transgender man, and I thought, yeah, I need to pick this up. I eventually did. I got it on my Kobo, and I was quite surprised to find out that it is not horror at all. But the name To Strip the Flesh is a very clever one. I also found out when I read it that it was translated by my friend Tristan, who is also a trans man, and goes by the translator name Emily Balistrieri. And I had no idea he had translated it, so that was a lovely surprise. A transgender story by a transgender translator. Love to see it. And I was also surprised that To Strip the Flesh, if you buy it, is actually a short story collection. And the titular To Strip the Flesh makes up the first two stories. You have the first one, To Strip the Flesh, the second one, To Strip the Flesh Continued, and then a collection of other short stories as well, all by the same writer, Oto Toda. But I just want to talk about the titular To Strip the Flesh, which, if you are a fan of manga and queer stories, if you are trans, this is something you need to check out. To Strip the Flesh begins with our protagonist, Chiaki Ogawa. He is a trans man, and his father is a hunter. Chiaki makes a living as a YouTuber, filming himself stripping the flesh from the animals that his father hunts and kills. In these videos, Chiaki is presenting as a woman. He has large breasts, wide hips, and his commenters say derogatory and demeaning things. His father also doesn't know that he's trans, and says, "I'm not taking my daughter out hunting with me. That is not a woman's place. Your place is to get married." And we also find out very early on, within the first few pages, that Chiaki's father has cancer. And he believes he doesn't have long left, and what he wants is to see his daughter married, to see her as a bride. Then we cut to Chiaki talking to his doctor about the fact that he's actually been on HRT now for a little while, and is considering other medical procedures. This is a very simple and short manga, comprised only of 2 chapters, and it's about 2 things. Chiaki finding happiness in his own body, in his own life, in his profession, and Chiaki's relationship to his father. Now that Chiaki knows that his father might not be around for much longer, he has to weigh up what he tells his father, how he wants to make his father happy, but his own version of happiness is very different to his father's. And he knows that his life has to go down one path in order for him to find happiness and contentedness. But perhaps he should walk an entirely different path to make his father happy. This hit me particularly hard as a fellow trans person, as a queer person, as someone who has lived a very different life to the one that her parents expected her to have. I know that my mother often watches my videos, so hi mum. I spent my 20s traveling the world, moving from country to country, job to job, doing different things, and slowly developing a sense of self-discovery and self-understanding and self-love eventually. It took until I was over the age of 30 to realize that I was trans. And my desire to travel, my desire to be self-employed, my desire to change who I thought I was, these things are all counterintuitive to that standard life that parents expect their kids to live, that their kid will presumably be straight and remain cisgender, for lack of a better way of phrasing that. And their kid will get married, they will have kids, they will have a stable job, they will have a mortgage, they will live that standard kind of boomer life. And aside from being trans, there are so many things that I have personally done that are very different from what my parents expected and what I grew up expecting of myself. And I've got plenty of friends who have lived that more standard, expected life. Great, grand. It has never worked for me, even gender and sexuality aside. And so reading this and watching Chiaki trying to figure out how true to be, this was something that I hugely related to. Trying to figure out how much he owes his father. Do you live a life that you think your parents will approve of, rather than living a life that you think will make you happy? A lot of us definitely give in to that. I was talking to my mother recently, and I was telling her that I have to just live in a way that makes me happy. And my mother was amazing. She has been so good to me all my life. And especially now, I'm more grateful than ever because she has accepted me as a trans woman. And she has told me that all she wants is for me to be happy and for me to just be alive. And I knew then that I could live whatever life I wanted to, that I could be happy for myself. and not have to worry about making other people happy. Because making myself happy would make them happy and proud. Chiaki is wrestling with that as well. Walking down the aisle as a woman in a white wedding dress is, for so many reasons, the opposite of what Chiaki wants and needs out of his life. But he considers it for his father's sake. And yet, this wouldn't be much of a story if that's what happened. So we know things are going to go differently, but I won't spoil it for you. This is also a story in 2 parts, and the second part surprised me, emotionally and in terms of its events. This is a manga that hit me incredibly hard. I've read so many transgender stories in my life. I've written a huge article, which is just a list of every great trans book I've ever read. These are novels, short story collections, manga and comics, and also non-fiction books. I've read so much, and none of them have hit me emotionally the way that To Strip the Flesh has. This was an entirely unique and personal experience about a person trying to figure out how to live his life while making his father happy and proud, especially when knowing that his father is dying. My parents have been so good to me my entire life, and the idea of disappointing or upsetting them is more than I can bear. And so I took a risk telling my parents what I want out of my own life and getting nothing but love and pride in return. I'm very lucky. This is a rarity in transgender stories. So many of us come out to our families, and that's when our relationship to them ends. I read a viral tweet that said you should date a trans girl and then you'll never have to meet her parents. That is the narrative. That is the reality for so many trans people. I'm one of the lucky ones. And now I want you to read To Strip the Flesh, to follow Chiaki's journey, because it feels very reflective of so many of our stories as trans people. And of course, Tristan did an absolutely brilliant job translating it. I had no idea that he did. It was lovely to see his name at the end when I got there, because manga doesn't do a good job of naming the translator, and they need to fix that. Anyway, there you go. To Strip the Flesh is absolutely brilliant. Very clever name, beautifully drawn, and a story that hit me very, very, very hard. Subscribe for books.